So we talked about verse 30, which is Prabhupada claims is the purpose of Bhagavad Gita. Then we talked about results of acting and not acting according to Krishna consciousness. And then we discussed these three important verses where Krishna in the 33rd verse, he says, Nigraha kim karishyati, what can repression accomplish? Which might make you feel that aren't we supposed to control? So we always talk about controlling our senses. But here Krishna is saying that what can repression accomplish? He's talking about Prakriti. It's our innate nature. Like, Brahman, Kshatriya, the Varnas that we have classified it. But then in next one, he says, give it up. Don't come under the control. So he's asking us to give up our desires, material desires. So there's a difference between Prakriti and Vasana. So Prakriti is our material nature, is our nature, and Vasana is our material desires. So he's asking us to not give up our Prakriti, our innate nature, Brahman, Kshatriya, Vaishya, Shudra, but then give up the desires of Vasana, lust, anger, greed. Lust, anger, greed, ignorance, pride, and envy. And then in 35, he says, don't take up others' nature also, which is which means that if you have he's kind of, Krishna is directing towards Arjuna that you are Kshatriya by nature. Don't try to take up a duty of a Brahmana. Okay, it won't work for you. It's going to be a catastrophe. So that's what we read in these verses. So don't do somebody else's duty. That's what. Do your own duty, because that's suited according to your nature. Right? Two twin brothers. One of them, let's call them Ramu and Shamu. So one of them Ramu had a more Brahmanic culture. Like, he liked to read and he was calm in nature. And so he grew up to be a teacher. But his other twin brother, Shamu, was more Kshatriya in nature, always in a mode of passion, fighting, and so on and so forth. So he grew up to be an army person. But then they both grew very, bored of their professions. And one day they thought, we are twins, let's just change our profession. So when Ramu went to the war front, he was just shocked by the strict discipline in the army. Wake up in the morning, do a lot of exercise, always be ready for a war. And so he was shocked. He was shocked by the army routine and cold showers, early morning parades, and so forth. So, and Shamu, on the other hand, he was ill-tempered, and he was trying to do a job of a Brahmana, of a teacher. And what he would do is he would punish everybody, whoever was, misbehaving in the school. It came to an extent that parents became fearful of sending their children to school. Right? So we all have duties, Nitya Dharma and Swadharma. We have talked about it in the past. And Swadharma is the Varna and Ashram. So Varna is the social contribution, and the Ashram is the personal elevation in life. So if we follow these properly, what we will get is, we'll get three things out of it. One is self-satisfaction, a meaningful service contribution in the society, and connection with fellow human beings without disturbing the society. Right? That's what Krishna in the 55th verse said. Swe dharma, swadharma nidhanam shreya. That you're doing your own duty is the best. So in short, Krishna told Arjuna that you are thinking Kshatriya is hard now and I should become a Brahman. But then if Kshatriya becomes non-violent, it will create a lot of nuisance in the society. And we even see it nowadays when people who are businessmen, when they try to come into being leaders, they create havoc in the society. We have seen that in the elections in this country. What happens? It creates a just create chaos in the society. So that shouldn't be done. So that was the essence that we discussed in the last class. So we did up to 35. So okay, the last section of the chapter is how to overcome lust. Okay, and I think I have not been giving you the, what do you call that, acronyms. Let me start from this chapter. I put an acronym somewhere in here. Let me see. Okay, yes. So if you put acronyms to the chapter, the acronym can be TREE. TREE is the acronym for this chapter. Okay, so the first part of the chapter was we discussed Arjun's question: what is better? Is Tyaga better or Karma better? Right? And Krishna said, don't falsely renounce this world to Arjun. If we renounce something that does not belong to us, it's foolishness, right? This world is not mine for to renounce. So the idea behind Karma Yoga is that everything is Krishna's, and everything must be utilized for his service. Right? We perform activity where we connect Lord's resources and energies back in his service. Tyaga versus Karma. The second thing we read about were the rungs of the ladder, the different levels of consciousness that people have. Okay, what's the topmost rung is bhakti. Lowest was karma kanda, and then we also understood that below karma kanda are animals. But in today's society, people are actually below animals even. Right? The modern humans are we live animalistic life, so we are even below the animals in the yoga ladder, in the rungs of the ladder. Then the third one was Krishna says, don't give up your duty because you are an exemplar. You are a leader, so people will look up to you. So that's Krishna's clarion call to Arjuna. That why should he fight, right? Okay, yes, Krishna knew that Arjuna is detached. He doesn't want violence. He's very soft-hearted, but then he has a duty to perform, and many who see him as a leader will also follow him. Right? Yes, you have all the qualities to renounce everything, but don't do that. Okay. So that's the acronym for this chapter. The last one is the enemy of the soul, which we will do today, which is.
Prabhuji, do we have acronym for chapter 1 and chapter 2 also?
We should have, I have them, but my bad. I didn't give it earlier. I just realized it today that I have not been giving you the acronyms. I can give you in the next class. And sure. I can also put them in the slides that I have, the Google folder. Okay, so coming to 36 is where Arjun asked this question. So Arjun is asking this question that, come back to the slides where I was. Yes, so 36. So 36 is the verse now where the things change a bit. So now Arjun is asking this question that Krishna, what is it that stops us from doing good? So we all have this sense of resistance that even though we know what is right, we're not able to do it. So there's a sense of resistance in our mind and heart. So Arjun is asking this question for our benefit that, okay, yes, I know now what you're telling me. I have to understand, I have to do my duty properly, not be attached, so on and so forth. But then he also knows that a time comes when we fall short and we just can't stand up to the challenge that is being put forth to us. So what happens at that point is what Arjun is now asking. So let's look at the verse. That's the 36th verse. Arjuna said, O descendant of Vrishni, by what is one impelled to sinful acts, even unwillingly, as if engaged by force? So Arjuna is accepting that there are points where we unwillingly do things. So sometimes situations become where we have to act unexemplarily and unwantedly against the Shastra. And it is also unwilling. But then Arjuna is saying Baladiva Niyojita. He's saying Baladiva, as if by force. And he's saying Atha Kena Prayuktoyam. Ayam means the living entity, that's me. Papam Charati. Why do I do this then? Arjuna is asking him. But to understand that, We have to understand what is this pap? What does pap mean? What is the meaning of the word pap? Right? So can somebody share their thoughts? What does pap mean? What do you think pap means? If you could give me a definition, somebody asks you a definition. If Krishna is saying papa, what does it mean?
Sin, Prabhu.
Sin, can you elaborate more on that? What does sin mean? What is sin? Somebody say that.
Doing something that is not we're not supposed to do. It's creating more karma.
Yes, that's a good point you bring out. Yes, that's a deliberate disobedience of the laws that have been set forth for us to follow. There's a constitutional arrangement in the universe. If you notice, everything is perfect, right? I sometimes feel I get very anxiety ridden when I see that things are not under my control. But then, even though things are not under my control, they're not out of control. Somebody is still controlling them. So when we don't follow the constitutional arrangement in this universe, the laws put forth by Krishna, and we deliberately are disobedient to them, that is pap. Yes. Thank you very much. Anybody else has any thoughts around what pap can be? No? Okay. So let me go to my slides. So
Sin can only be taken as Prabhuji, the offense that we do against Lord.
Offense against the Lord. Well, pap is more affecting me and not Krishna in any way. So it could be offensive, yes, I agree with you, but it's not necessarily offensive towards Krishna. Krishna is like, we cannot offend him in any way. We don't have that power. But yes, we can do things that can push us away from him. Yes, in that sense, yes, it can be a problem for us. So Chaitanya Mahaprabhu gives a definition of lust in Chaitanya Charitamrita Adi. He says, Atmendriya Priti Vancha Tare Bali Kama Krishnendriya Priti Ichha Dhare Prema Nama. The desire to gratify one's own senses is kama, lust. But the desire to please the senses of Lord Krishna is prema. So now, if you look at it, they're the same magnitude, but they're completely opposite to each other, lust and love.
Yeah.
And Prabhupada will go through the purports, and one of the purports, Prabhupada also says that lust is just a perverted reflection of love in the spiritual world. So because love is meant for us to give it to Krishna, but when I direct that towards my own self, that okay, I want to enjoy. Why does Krishna only get to enjoy? I want to enjoy. Then it becomes kama, then it becomes lust. That's it. That's the problem that comes up. So I think I have some. Okay, yes. So this is an important cycle. I just want to bring this out here. So when you will read about pap, there are 4 categories. You'll see there are 4 words that are put forth many places. Aprarabdha, prarabdha. So aprarabdha, prarabdha, putam, and bijam. So there are four categories of pap, right? So prarabdha karma. So prarabdha karma means manifest reaction. So when somebody smokes cigarette, his or her teeth will become yellow, lips will become darker, and so that's actually manifestation of that effect of smoking. So it's a prarabdha karma. It's been manifest. Aprarabdha karma is unmanifest. A thief steals something, but the police hasn't caught up with him yet. So it's a aprarabdha. It is not manifest. The reaction of that karma, of that action has not yet manifested itself. Then there is bija. Bija is a sinful desire. Okay, so sinful desire. We again and again desire to do an activity. Right? So that's sinful. So that's coming out of ignorance. That's the starting point, where I don't have enough control over my intelligence and mind, and I have that desire to do it again and again. Okay, and then that bijam is even before bijam comes, kuta. So kuta means sinful disposition. It's a proclivity. It's a tendency to do papa, right? Just like a man, if a man is blind, he still can be lustful. Right? That's coming from previous birth. It's a conditioning that's happening from time immemorial. So the kutam becomes bijam. Bijam becomes papa, that is the sinful action. And papa manifests as a prarabdha and prarabdha. And then a portion of this transforms back to kutam and the cycle continues. Right? That is why prashchit, atonement, doesn't help us much. Right? It can reduce the prarabdha and aprarabdha karma, but it does not reduce the kutam and bijam. So atonement is that, okay, fine, oh, I did this wrong. Just like in Christians, there is this tendency to go on Sunday and they confess their crimes or whatever sins they have done, and then from Monday onwards, they're back to square one. They continue to do that. That atonement doesn't help us much. And even in Srimad Bhagavatam, this question is asked by Parikshit Maharaj, that, that how will these people get rid of the sins if they keep on doing it again and again, again and again? And initially to test Parikshit Maharaj, Sukadeva Goswami says, oh, atonement. But then Parikshit Maharaj rejects that. He says that it's not, it's very much like the bathing of an elephant. Manne kunjara shauchvam. That's the phrase that Parikshit Maharaj uses. And he says that just like an elephant takes a bath in the lake, and when the elephant comes out, he sprays dust back on himself. That's very much like atonement. But we don't want that. We want all these to be rooted out of our consciousness. Right? So atonement can reduce prarabdha and aprarabdha karma, but it does not reduce the kutam and bija. Right? If I give you another example how to understand it more from a practical perspective. Let me see. Yeah. So when I went to after my school, I went to college. I was staying in a hostel. I had a friend who came from a very good family. His father was probably some big shot in the army, and he was a very smart guy. He came to college. He used to stay in the hostel with us, and then he came there, and he started smoking and drinking. Okay? So when he came, there was already a sinful disposition. He had that already. Nobody had to teach him how to smoke. He already had the disposition in his heart. And then it got manifested as a desire when he came in association of people who were doing that thing. And then came the papa part. Then he did that activity. He did that sinful action. And then unmanifest and manifest reactions came. And then those unmanifest were that he was getting some lung infections, which he was not able to catch in the initial phase when he used to smoke. He used to smoke a lot, so he couldn't catch it in the initial phases. And but the prarabdha was obviously that he was short of breath a lot, and he had coughs on and off. But then he didn't realize that. It was after a long time, and it didn't go away for some time. Then he went to see a doctor, and the doctor told him that your lungs are having some infection. That was primarily because of excessive smoking. So the kuta was already there. It got converted to bija, the desire, when he came in association of such people. He did the papa, he did the action, and then they were unmanifested and manifested reactions. And then came the suffering part. But then that doesn't mean that he gave up smoking after understanding it. No. It's very hard to give it up because we are not able to understand the essence that, okay, why should that he making that connection that it is primarily having because of this reason and give it up completely. He couldn't make that connection. So that's what all atonement is about. That, okay, yeah, you just do it very superficially. You don't go deep, right? And the way to do it is given as, there's this verse in Padma Puran. It says, aprarabdha phalam papam kutam bijam phalon mukham kramenaiva praliyate Vishnu bhakti ratatmanam. For those who are engaged in the devotional service of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, all sinful reactions, whether fructified in the stalk or in the form of seed, gradually vanish. So all these are gone; they go away, all of them. It's not like that only superficially they are gone. Right? Just like a prisoner, when he begs for mercy and an early release, then the authority, seeing that he is behaving properly, they let him go, even though he had more time to be in the jail, right? So that was because he behaved according to the laws of the jail, of the authority, right? So similar, but others have to continue to go through their quota, right? So Prabhupada, when Prabhupada came to this country, he saw that the hippies were doing all the papa. But then Prabhupada was able to transform them to devotees. He was able to eradicate all their karmas, all the sinful, either it's a kuta, bija, aprarabdha, prarabdha, everything was gone. Because Prabhupada taught everyone how to become Vishnu Ratatmana by having a devotional service towards Krishna. So it has to be uprooted right from the core. It doesn't help just by doing it on the surface. So, and then we also read, right, that in the second chapter we read that there was 2.62, right, that Krishna says, Dhihaito Vishyan Pumsam Sangaste Shubjayate, Sanga Sanjayate Kama, Kamam Krodho Vijayate. That the three modes are the ones that impel us to do that sinful activity. Right? So now all that has already been told, right? In the second chapter, Krishna explained that this is the way you fall prey to this consciousness, bodily consciousness. So why is Arjuna asking this question now? Because he has not found a solution yet. Right? Krishna told him all the philosophy behind it, but didn't Krishna give him a solution? Right? Arjuna sees many act impiously. Duryodhan, Karna, right? Even demigods misbehave. So now Arjuna is asking, what is the reason why this happens? Now you have to give me a reason and you have to explain it. How should I curb that? Right? So that's going to be the essence of these verses as we go forward. Right? And
Prabhuji, what is kutam? Will you please explain one more time?
Kutam. So kutam is a sinful disposition. And this sinful disposition means it is inherent somewhere down deep. It is not even yet, you don't even know that you have a desire. Like, for example, when Steve Jobs was making the iPhone, he said that people don't even know that they need it, right? But then people had this desire of a fancy phone that they could have everything on their palm. As soon as they saw the phone, people got attracted to it. Right? So there was already something that was inherent in them, a desire for having that kind of a gadget in their hands where it's like the entire computer on a hand now. So the disposition was already there. All Steve Jobs did was convert it to a desire by bringing that particular gadget out there in the open. As I mentioned, right, my friend, he already had a disposition to smoke. He already has a disposition to enjoy. He had those desires down deep, but he didn't know that. Till he was in school, he never smoked. He never had no drinking or no smoking. But the moment he came to college, he was in the hostel and he saw others drinking and smoking, that got converted to a desire. Right? That is why association makes such an important difference. It can convert our disposition to a desire, a tendency to a desire, a proclivity to a desire. That's what it means.
Got it, Prabhuji. Thank you so much.
That is why Prabhupada always said, if you want to be a drunkard, you hang out with drunkards. They will teach you everything about drinking. You know, which alcohol has more, or which drink has more alcohol concentration, where do you find it cheap, and how to drink it that it gives you maximum efficacy. So they will convert the disposition to enjoy, to disposition to, intoxicate yourself into a full-fledged desire. That's the difference there.
Haribo?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so it seems like, there's like a push. There's some type of push going on here all the time. And like, if there's some type of, it depends where our identity is, where our consciousness is then. Because if you're not in one position, you're in another. And if you're in a position like identifying with the modes of the senses, then there's a push going to come. That's the nature of the energy. It's a push on our cosmic or our soul. But now you're saying Arjuna's going to get an answer finally, and
Yes, Arjuna is going
it's
to
just
get
like
an answer.
like you said, the Bhagavatam, he was trying to even tell him jnana, might work, and finally they come down like you just said. What did you do? Devotional service. So the push is there, and the push will always be there. Even the atonement is you do good activity, and what happens? The reaction is more living out of the good activity. It's not right. So now you're saying that Arjuna is finally going to get that answer, because I'm seeing like, well, why does he act like that? It's a push though, right? Isn't it? Is it a push?
Push from the material modes of nature. Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes, there is a push.
Okay.
And the push is also there because I have been interacting with them.
Uh-huh.
And if you, so I can see the senses that we have and the sense objects that are out there in this material world, they already have a connection, right? What I can do is I can just ignore my mind who's controlling those senses. If I keep on listening to the mind who is controlling those senses, then I'm automatically a slave to those senses. So that push will continue to happen. And that is why when we will read further, Krishna will give that hierarchy. Senses, in the senses, about the senses are mind, about the mind is intelligence, about that. So he'll give that. So that, yes, you're right. He'll give a solution now.
Yeah, it's amazing, but this push is always somewhere, and now you're illuminating it, so maybe I can figure it out, because I want to grab hold of the right push, isn't it?
Yes, we have to grab hold of the right push, and it's all coming from ignorance. So that's why I have that ignorance in the top. That is the starting point for bija. If I'm not ignorant, if I very consciously make a decision that no, I'm not going to follow the whims of my mind. So suddenly I am kind of standing against the mind. I'm saying, no, I'm not going to do this. So, but then unfortunately, my mind is so weak because I have been constantly feeding it whatever it's been asking me in this material world. My mind has become very weak. So because of that weakness, and that's something that we talked about in the second chapter, Abhīṣṭa-dohaṁ. So Abhīṣṭa-dohaṁ, and that Abhīṣṭa-dohaṁ has left me very vulnerable to be attacked by the modes of nature.
Oh.
So it has left me to be very, very vulnerable.
Thank you.
Yes, you're welcome. Okay. So yes, so this is the cycle of our karmas, cycle of the sin. And this is something important to understand, because what I'm realizing in whatever little bhakti I do is that if I'm able to clearly define my enemy, my challenges, I'm able to give them a much better fight. Right? If we know these details, that okay, I do have a sinful desire, I don't want it to be converted to an action. But if I don't have that clear picture in mind, all this will look like a big mesh to me. Okay, my desire, oh my God, the desire is same as the reaction. All these things will sound very similar and be very confusing. So we can very easily fight with the enemies if we are able to clearly delineate them, give them a face, give them a name, and then I'm able to fight them much better. That's why I put in a lot of these detailed explanations about each one of them. Many of these things we have talked about. So it's important that we know and understand these so that we have a clear identification of our enemy. We're able to fight it. So I talked about this verse, clearly telling us, Padma Puran, that by engaging in the service of Krishna, we'll get rid of everything. Not just the ones that are fructified, or not just the prarabdha and aprarabdha, everything. Kuta and bija also burnt out when I'm bhakta of Krishna. So let's look at this verse. There's another one. This comes from Prem Bhakti Chandrika. This is a book by Narottam Das Thakur. It says, Kama Krishna karmarpane Krodha Bhakta Dveshi Jane, Lobha Sadhu Sangha Hari Katha, Moha Ishta Labdhe Bine, Mada Krishna Guna Gane, Niyukta Karibe Yatha Katha. So, the enemies that we have, Kama, Krodha, Lobha, Moha, Mada, Matsarya, all these. So what Narottam Thakur is telling us, we can use everything for Krishna's service, right? So, and he's saying he can use lust in the service of Krishna. You know, lust is basically, lust means anything, right? It couldn't just, lust doesn't just mean an illicit affair. It's just not, in general terms, when we use the word lust, we think of it as a sexual, something sexual, but lust can be anything. Anything that we desire outside our sanctioned quota, that is lust. So basically that's what lust is. So we can use everything for Krishna's service. Lust can be used for Krishna's service. Anger can be used against those who are inimical towards the devotees of the Lord. Like Hanuman's example is given. He went and burned the Lanka, right? And we can madness. So all these things can be used in Krishna's service. This is a verse coming out from Bhakti Chandra. Okay, so we are at we're reading 36. What Arjun is saying. So let's see if there's something in the purport Prabhupada is pointing out. Okay, so small purport. Okay, so now coming to what Krishna is answering now. So he's saying Shri Bhagavan Vacha Kama Isha Krodesha Rajo Guna Samudbhava Mahashano Mahapapma Vidhi Enam Iha Vairinam. Supreme Personality of Godhead said, it is lust only, Arjun, which is born of contact with the material mode of passion and later transformed into wrath, and which is the all-devouring sinful enemy of this world. So it's the all-devouring. It's Mahashano and it's Mahapapma. So it's all-devouring and it's all is most sinful. So Krishna is quickly identifying the enemy right here. Kama, which transforms to anger. So second chapter, 62nd verse is right. Sanga sanjayate kama, kama krodho abhijayate, krodha bhavati sammoha, sammoha buddhi. So he's saying that kama, when it's fulfilled, it leads to lobha, and when not fulfilled, it transforms to anger. And if you would have noticed, in this world, usually our karma transforms to krodha because the material world is designed in this way that it does not fulfill our desires. Right? It's not meant to fulfill our desires. This place is not meant to fulfill our desires. It's not designed that way. It is designed in an inappropriate way to make us realize that this place is not my permanent home. Hotel rooms can be good for a day or two, but they cannot replace our. After some time, you'll become frustrated. So Krishna, by creating this material world, he knows exactly how to give us various kinds of circumstances in life so that I will become sensitized towards my original goal and purpose. Right? Everything in Krishna's energy, everything in Krishna's creation is organized specifically for us to come to that point. What is my purpose? Right? There is always this dissonance in our lives. There's this cognitive dissonance that we are trying to be a part of a world which we can never be quite in harmony with. Okay, so I'll repeat. We're trying to be part of a world with which we can never be in harmony with. And that leads to anger. So kama krodho abhijayate. So kama, it's never fulfilled. And so kama always transforms to krodha. Right? That is the angst that every living entity is suffering. I'm trying to control something and I'm not able to control it. And that's what leaves me frustrated, leaves me angry. Okay. But an intelligent person can use that frustration also for his or her benefit. That, understanding that frustration opens up doors for more questions, and we can get answers for that. So the whole purpose of this world is to teach us that, what our true purpose is, what is our true home. This world is not meant for me to enjoy. If it was, then things wouldn't have been so hard here. Just because Krishna has made this world so that I can become more conscious of my purpose and where am I coming from and where am I supposed to go, and I can be conscious of that, then that's the whole purpose of this world. So that is why when I try to enjoy, which is unnatural, I get krodha, anger comes in. So Krishna is saying that this kama, lust only, which is born of contact with the material mode of passion. So it's coming. So this kama is the one that's responsible, right? And then he says mahashana. So mahashana means all devouring. Nobody is left out of it. So one thing that I always tell myself whenever I'm frustrated, I said nobody is happy in this world. You might have realized it. Everybody is suffering in this world. He or somebody whom you might see, that person is happy in one situation, but there might be a million other situations where you might not see that person suffering and being frustrated. So it's all devouring. It's not just you or I am suffering. Everybody in this world is suffering, because that is the nature of this world, to suffer. Right? So it doesn't leave anyone, nobody being happy. Then it says mahapapam. It engages us in horrible sins. Krishna is saying, that's the word he's using. So Krishna is giving a lot of emphasis that please know kama and krodha are your vairis. Vairis means enemies. They're not your friends. Right? Unfortunately, in today's world, when we see these lot of movies nowadays, right? We see that people are movies show kama and krodha as heroic. When the hero is able to attract many females towards himself, he becomes heroic. Or if he, out of anger, is able to kill a few people, it's shown as heroic, right? So, and unfortunately, this is instilled in the heart of children who watch such movies, and they become violent from an early age. So that's this gift of this unfortunate gift of this modern society, kama and krodha being glorified, and thinking it will bring great happiness in our life. So we have to accept, we have to imbibe, and we have to etch this concept in my heart that kama and krodha are not my friends. Right? And how do you control that kama? You keep your desires subservient to dharma, what Krishna is giving us. Okay? So the word Krishna is saying Bhagavan Uvacha, right? So Krishna is saying it, and because what Krishna is saying is because Krishna himself has subdued kama himself. So he's an authority, so you can follow him. Ravan is an impersonification of lust, right? And Rama subdued him. So there are two things now. Enjoying prescribed pleasure. So be very careful. I'm saying prescribed pleasure, and do it under regulation. That is the way to deal with kama. Don't try to overdo pleasures. When we come to the 6th chapter, 36th verse, Krishna says, yuktahara, yukta chesa, yukta chetasas. Sorry, today my mind is not working. So what Krishna says in that verse is that you have to control everything. Control your sleep, control your eating. Krishna doesn't say don't sleep or don't eat. He says do everything, but do it in a controlled fashion. So pleasures are not being taken away from us, but we are being asked to, first of all, only enjoy which has been prescribed for us. And secondly, we are asked to do under a regulation. So when we eat meat, that's not what we are supposed to do. So we are going beyond what has been prescribed for us. So that's again is lust manifesting itself. Okay. So, and Prabhupada in the purport, he will say that, let's see. Yes, Prabhupada is saying both lust and wrath can be spiritualized. So Prabhupada gives a very logical reasoning here that Janmadyasya yato anvayad itratascha bhigyasvara. He's saying the origin of everything is Krishna. So then if the lust and wrath is being originated from Krishna, then we should be able to spiritualize it. Right? So Prabhupada gives the example of Hanuman burning the city of Ravan. So he was using his anger in a proper way. And he's one of the greatest devotees. So when lust and wrath, when they are employed in Krishna consciousness, become our friends, instead of our enemies. Right? So we can use all these for Krishna's service. And Prabhupada was very ambitious himself, right? As they say, right, he built a home in which everybody could live happily. What a desire to have, right? So as I was showing the verse from Prem Bhakti Chandrika, Kama, Krishna, Karmarpati, right? Prabhupada knew how to put his ambitions for Krishna's service. Right? Then there is this verse in Chaitanya Charitamrita which says, Krishna Bhakti Rasa Bhavita Mati Kuto Apina Labhyate Tatra Laulyam Api Mulyam Ekam Janma Koti Sukriti Nasa Labhyate. So what Mahaprabhu is telling us that Krishna Bhakti Rasa Bhavita Mati. Yes, so he's saying that that bhakti, you should be very greedy for bhakti, right? And that greediness is the only way we can get bhakti. Laulyam, tatra laulyam api mulyam ekam. That the only cause to get bhakti is laulyam, that intense desire to have it. And that comes when we do service. Then Krishna from within our heart, he gives us that knowledge how we can come to that platform. Tesham satata yuktanam bhajati priti purvakam dadami buddhi yogam tam yena mam upayanti. 10th chapter, verse number 10. Krishna clearly tells us that Tesham satata yuktanam bhajati priti purvakam. Who approaches me with love and devotion, Tesham satata dadami buddhi yogam tam. I give them buddhi. I give them the knowledge how they can come to me. I give them the laulyam. I give them the desire that will bring them to me. So that is the way to spiritualize. We can even spiritualize our karma. And that's the beauty of bhakti. All the other paths that Krishna has told us, Gyan, Dhyan, all that, there we have to subdue, we have to control, we have to curb it. That, restrict yourself. If you want to become a Dhyana yogi, you have to restrict your senses, restrict your lust. Bhakti is the only process, the only way where you can use those things also in Krishna's service. That's the most natural path that we can take. Otherwise, you can keep curbing it, you can keep pushing it down, one day, and then it comes out with tenfold more strength. You can say, oh no, I'm not going to eat, I'm going to control my tongue, eating sense. And you might not eat, any fancy meal for 10 days. After 10 days, your tongue will come back with so much more force and say, okay, now you have to listen to me. Now you have to feed me. And then then you have to you do double than what you were doing earlier. But if you regulate that sense and use it for Krishna's service, then you don't have to restrict yourself. You don't have to curb that desire. That's the beauty of bhakti. That's what Prabhupada means, that we can spiritualize it, employ it in Krishna consciousness.
Prabhuji, can you give an example of how we can spiritualize the lust, the wrath, the anger? I could understand with Hanuman, Lord Hanuman's example, but what about spiritualizing the lust? Any example we have for that?
Lust. There is a verse in Bhagavatam. I can pull that out. There is a verse which Gopiyat Kamat Bhaya Kanso. So that they say that gopis were able to attain Krishna by being being lusty for that. So the word lust doesn't just necessarily mean to have, as I said, it's not just the sexual aspect of it. I'm opening that. I'll pull that out. Just give 7:130, I think.
Prabhuji, you mentioned, right? Lust can be anything that we desire outside our sanctioned quota, right? That is what you said. So
Yes.
how do we relate in this case? Gopi can had the lust to attain Krishna. Means how does it mean? How do we explain?
Because that's within your quota, right? To love Krishna is within your quota. It's not outside your quota. So okay. So here's the verse. Let me share the screen. So this is the verse from the 7th canto, 1st chapter, verse number 30. Kama Dvesha Bhyasneha. So Narad Muni is talking to Yudhishthira Maharaj here, and he's telling that how different people can get Krishna's attention. So one of them is lusty desires. So Prabhupada is telling in the purport that if one hears of gopis' lusty behavior with Krishna, becomes free from lusty desires, certainly the gopis who approach Krishna became free from desires. What is that? I think it's the next verse. Sorry, Prabhupada is probably highlighting that. Yes, the gopis by their lusty desires have obtained the mercy of Krishna. So lusty desire means they had this intense desire to have a relationship with Krishna. So Prabhupada is saying their desire appeared lusty, but actually they were not lusty desired of this material world. Right? There's a vast difference between them. So Prabhupada is saying that having that intense desire to attain Krishna can actually purify us. That can take us to the next level in our bhakti process. And that's what gopis did. It seemed that it seemed like it was lust, but it was just this intense desire to be with Krishna. So we can also have this intense desire to serve Krishna. That can be lust. So as I said, lust just, so the word lust is just not related to sexual inclinations. It's also about, it could be also put in a positive way, that we could have this intense desire as we have for things in this material world. We can have that same intense desire to attain Krishna. But that's a very high position. Gopis are being given as an example. We don't imitate them, but that comes by itself when we continue in this path of this bhakti process that has been given, the Vaidhi bhakti that we all learn. When we continue on that path, then it automatically, that position of being very greedy to serve Krishna comes, right? Just trust the process, continue hearing, continue serving, continue taking good guidance, and then we will be able to reach that position.
So Prabhuji, how we differentiate between lust and love? Then I thought gopis were in love with Lord Krishna. It was intense desire that you mentioned just now, right? Lust. But were they not in love with Lord Krishna? Unconditional, unmotivated, unalloyed love for Krishna? Why are we saying it as a lust?
So the word lust is being used to show that intense desire. Yes, it is love, but there's a difference, right? So the intense desire is coming from my end. The desire is mine. As long as I keep thinking that, okay, there's something for me in there, it seems lusty. But then, as Prabhupada is telling that, but that lust that the gopis are showing is not the lust that we have in this material world. Because it's directed towards Krishna, that lust and love become the same. But in this material world, because that lust is being directed towards my sense gratification, it's different from love. But because gopis, even this intense desire was focused towards Krishna, for them, lust and love were the same, but not for me.
So Prabhuji, how do we differentiate between greed and lust then? Yeah.
So the lust and greed are nearly the same thing. They mean both the same thing. It's just an intense desire to have something. Now the difference is that the intense desire to please my own senses, or is it to please Krishna? That will define whether it's just lust by itself, or is it lust, or is it love? That's the way to differentiate. To whom am I focusing that intense desire will define whether it's lust or love. If it's towards myself, it's love.
And you are saying, Prabhuji, greed and lust are the same?
Greed, yes. So what is greed? Greed is also the desire, right? That I wanted something for myself. Oh yeah, I'm greedy for something. I need it for myself, for my own use. So that's greed and lust.
Greed was something that I have the taste for it. Like I have one pencil and I'm greedy for one more pencil. So that is a greed. And lust is like lust is something that you don't even have and you aspire for it in a negative way. But greed is something that you already have, but you are wanting more and more and more because you are never satisfied with 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. That is what I thought, Prabhuji.
So greed doesn't necessarily mean that you already have that thing. Greed can be for something that you don't have also, right? Mm-hmm. A poor man can be greedy for money. He's not rich. Or probably I can be greedy for I might, let's say, I'm going to work very hard at office so that I can earn enough money so that I can buy a car that I'm greedy about. So it's not necessarily that I must have it already.
Mhm.
It's just that intense desire to have something can be defined as greed or as lust.
Okay.
Yeah,
Thank
it's
you.
just an intense desire to have it.
Thank you, Prabhu.
So, and gopis was, as I said, gopis, the word lust is being used, but for them, lust and love are the same thing. But for me, because I am in this material world and I have material desires, that is why my lust is completely opposite to love. It's a completely opposite, it's the opposite direction. That's the difference. Okay, so let's get back to what we were. Any other thoughts anybody has?
I have one question.
Yes, true.
If when we first started talking about this, it said lust is born from the passion.
Mhm.
Okay, so this lust, this word lust or this greed, when we say it's born from the passion, is this if this is a passion of materialism or is it a passion for Krishna? That would be like still a differentiation, like it was for the gopis. You know, if it's a lust for material or it's lust for the supreme.
Mhm. Yes.
Isn't it?
Yes,
So
that's true.
okay, so then, because I'm trying to guess, when you said the lust, I said, well, where's that coming from? You know, where's it coming from? And Krishna says that it comes from that passion, right? It's born of passion. And so, and you were saying earlier, the modes are the nightmare that we are captured in here. So there's no way ever to be happy here because of these modes. So, okay. So I got it. And it is amazing that we can see that if that lust is on the highest level, like you say, it can't be artificial. But I mean, we're learning that our highest desire should be that of the Supreme. So then that will come. But just the differentiation of what that is, like you say, it could all be cloudy. This all could be cloudy. But the more it becomes defined, like Shalini is trying to do, she needs to define it. Right? Yeah. She's trying to put her finger on it. And while she's putting her finger on it, I'm following her. Because I want to have my finger on it too. She's woke up to a point, and you're trying to, you know, tell us this, explain this from different angles. So, but when I heard it was lust born from passion, then it just takes it one step back, but it's still the same point, like you're saying.
As Prabhupada is giving, right? So if you listen, when the living entity comes in contact with material creation, his eternal love for Krishna is transformed into lust in the association of mode of passion. Or in other words, the sense of love of God becomes transformed into lust. So it's not that it's something different. It's just that the way I used it, it became lust or love. But then when gopis were using it towards Krishna, lust and love became the same thing. But because I used it for my own benefit, for my own satisfaction, the lust became completely opposite to love. Right? That's what the problem is. And because that lust will never get satisfied in this world, it's going to turn into wrath. It is going to turn into anger, so on and so forth. Illusion, as Prabhupada is telling us, 2.62 and 2.63. So that's the problem that happens. So even when gopis, when we see the word the verse that I was showing, it says lust. Yes, but then for them, lust and love is the exact same thing. But that's not the case for me. Because my lust is associated with the material modes of nature. It's for my own satisfaction. That is why it's pure lust. But for gopis, even though it was lust, but it was like, it's a difference between gold and iron. My lust is iron, gopis' lust is gold because it's fully integrated for Krishna.
Beautiful. Thank you. Thank you.
You're welcome. Shalini Mati, was that clear for you? I'm not sure if that helped you.
No, Prabhuji, it did help me, but while you were reading this about the milk in contact with salt, tamarind and stuff, then I'm reading this line, Prabhuji, when lust is unsatisfied, it turns into wrath, and wrath is transformed into illusion, and illusion continues. What is this illusion we are talking here, Prabhuji? how the anger transformed into illusion.
So when it's when we are so this goes back to 2.62 and 6.3. You can read those purports in detail, but so it's basically that so when I get angry, right? When you become angry, you are no more in control, right? You might have noticed that.
Yeah.
When I get angry, I just speak out anything I want. I do things that I wouldn't have done. So it becomes that I become more and more controlled by the modes of. So when I become more and more controlled by, so that means I'm getting more and more dense into illusion. So that's the way to understand it. Whenever I get angry, I lose control over my basic senses also, right? In anger, you might hit somebody. You might say words that you wouldn't have said when you were not angry. So the modes have become more, you become more deeply entrenched in those modes. That's what it means.
Yes, makes sense. Yeah.
And then the more deeply you are entrenched in those modes, the more you are pushed into that material existence. The modes have become more tight, they have more tightly bound you up, bound us up. That is why lust is the beginning point, and Krishna will say in the next verse, you just cut it off at that point.
Thank you, Prabhuji.
Okay, I'm happy you was able to help you here. Okay.
Prabhuji, I have one question, Prabhuji.
Yes, Maji.
Prabhuji, in devotional service, we can have greedy and lust, but in material things, we can't have, right, Prabhuji? Like how gopis are doing. In same way, we can also, like, we can't take that much standard, but at least in our level, we can have that thing, greedy in the devotional service, right?
Yes, that's correct. Yeah, that's what Prabhupada is telling us, that we can have it for spiritual, we can use it for spiritual. That's the beauty of bhakti, as I was saying. In all the other yoga practices, we are asked to curb these things, curb your lusty tendency, curb your anger, control them. But only in bhakti can you use them properly. That's the proper use of all those things. Yes.
Okay, Prabhuji, thank you.
So let's go to next verse. So here Krishna, as fire is covered by smoke, as a mirror is covered by dust, or as the embryo is covered by the womb, the living entity is similarly covered by different degrees of lust. So very good poetic way of presenting things here Krishna is doing. So he's saying that there are different degrees of covering of lust also. It's not that all of us are at equal levels of lust, are equally lusty. No. So the fire covered by smoke that is being talked about here is in the mode of goodness. And I think Prabhupada will talk about it. So when lust is compared to the fire living, smoke and fire. So fire is covered by smoke, mirror covered by dust, and embryo covered by womb. Yes. So fire covered by smoke. So Prabhupada is telling us the living spark can be a little perceived. So it's a mode of goodness. The spiritual nature is still visible. So there is some inclination for God consciousness, for Krishna consciousness. So just like in fire, right? When you see a smoke, you can always see fire in that. It's not that the fire is completely, it's not visible. So that's the first aspect of lust. Second aspect of lust that's been given to us is mirror covered by dust. And that's the mode of passion. This is what Prabhupada is saying here. The dust on the mirror, cleansing process of the mirror of the mind, so many special. So yes, so the mirror covered by dust is mode of passion. The spiritual nature is covered. God consciousness cannot be seen. And the last one that Krishna is giving the example is the embryo. Embryo covered by the womb is an analogy illustrating a helpless position. That's the mode of ignorance. Very difficult to see. Even so even thicker a covering, right? And if you look at in the whole process, there are 5 coverings in total. There are totally 5 coverings. The one is so there are 5 types of covering. There are 5 types of consciousness. Actually, there are 5 levels of consciousness that every living entity in this world has. So one is a covered consciousness. It's called Avrita Chetana. Trees, plants, all these things, they are Avrita. Their consciousness is completely covered. Okay. Then slightly above them is Sankuchita Chetna, which is kind of contracted, shrunken consciousness. Aquatics, birds, animals, so on and so forth, right? So those are the two categories in which humans don't come, Avritta and Sankuchita. But then there are three other consciousness. There's Mukulita, which is a budding consciousness. Only human beings have that, but they are human beings that are in mode of ignorance. Then there is another one, Vikachita consciousness, which is blossoming. So that can be in a mode of passion or passion goodness. And then there is Purna Vikachita, that's completely blossomed consciousness, which only a Krishna conscious human can have. So that's what being Krishna is, as Krishna is saying. So Krishna is telling us that the lust covers our consciousness to different degrees, and that can eventually put us in different bodies accordingly, right? So I mentioned about completely covered, which are trees, plants, some contracted, shrunken, which are birds and beasts, and then there are three in human beings also. So accordingly, so based on this example that Krishna is giving, depending on how thick the covering of lust is on me, accordingly, I will behave. My tendency, my proclivity will be. Yes, that's the that's the okay. So we go to the next one, 39. Thus the wise living entities, pure consciousness, become covered by his eternal enemy in the form of lust, which is never satisfied and which burns like fire. So it burns like fire. Now this is a very interesting way of putting it. So Avritta-jnana. So it's saying that lust covers our jnana, Krishna is saying. So we have so many things, we have so much intelligence, right? We read every day, we read scriptures, but then when lust covers us, when lust attacks us, we forget it. It gets covered, right? And I talked about what lust means. Atmindriya Krishna Priti. So when we want to satisfy ourselves independent of God, that is lust, right? Desire to satisfy Krishna's senses is love, right? They both are opposite. They are of the same magnitude but opposite in direction. But then if we say prema is for the soul and kama is for matter, but then they all can be, again, as we were talking, it can be used for Krishna's service, right? And it's nitya vairina. It's a constant enemy, nitya vairina. So lust is constant enemy. And we have been talking about it again and again. Never expect that this world is going to ease up, become easy on you. It's never going to happen. But what is surely going to happen is we will get stronger as we continue to practice bhakti. That surely is going to happen, right? So this karma, it covers our knowledge. When our enjoying tendency increases, our desire to engage in spiritual activities and to live our lives according to spiritual knowledge, it goes down. It doesn't look attractive to me. And what Krishna, when he says, Avritta Jnanina, so it also means that Jnanis also become bewildered. It's not just that ignorant people become bewildered. Even Jnanis also become bewildered. Once what happened that Vyasadeva had a disciple, his name was Jaimini. So Jaimini Rishi, Bhagavatam tells us that Jaimini Rishi so when Vyasadeva divided the Vedas into 4 parts, Jaimini Rishi was given to take care of one of them. So he's a very powerful devotee. He's a sage. So once Jaimini Rishi came to Vyasadeva and he said, "Oh, my dear Guru, I have conquered Kama. I have conquered lust." And his Guru Maharaj smiled. Okay, very well. Then Jaimini Rishi left. And then suddenly the weather changed. It started raining heavily as if it was a flash flood. Really dark clouds rolling in. It became very dark suddenly. It became cold. And all that. And Jaimini Rishi was in his hut, meditating. There was a knock on his door. He opens the door, and there is this beautiful lady drenched drenched completely and shivering because of the sudden change in weather. And she begs him, so please let me in. I'm really drenched and I'm feeling very cold and I might die in this unexpected change of weather. Gemini says, okay, that's fine. You come in, but because I have controlled karma, I will stay out. I will not stay within this house. You stay in, I'll stay out. And she said, okay, that's fine. So Gemini Rishi goes out, he stays outside. But then Gemini Rishi, because he had seen that beautiful lady, and because he had that kuta, the sinful proclivity, it got converted to a beast, a sinful desire. He wanted to go and enjoy the day. So he goes in and he sees that the lady is sitting on the cot in the corner of the room. He goes close to her and he has a desire to enjoy it. So the moment he touches her, that lady turns into Vyasadeva to receive Vyasadeva. And Vyasadeva is laughing at him. He's saying, my dear child, you thought you have conquered karma? Even such self-realized souls like Lord Shiva, Brahma, they have not been able to conquer it. What do you think you have done? So never ever think that you have conquered these enemies, but you can always use them for bhakti. Somebody once a devotee said to Prabhupada, I'm not like you. He was kind of trying to glorify. He was glorifying Prabhupada. So Prabhupada said, yes, I don't have karma. I don't have lust. Prabhupada said that. But Prabhupada thought for a minute and he said, I don't have time for karma. And that brings in such a huge amount of knowledge for us. If you just unpack that one statement, I don't have time for karma. What Prabhupada is telling us, engage yourself in service to such an extent that you don't even have time to get to time for these things, right? So don't just think that, I have become a bhakta, I've done so much service, I'm good enough, my position is strong. Never. It never happens. Our position never becomes that strong. Maya never stops knocking on our door. All it's looking for just one opening and Maya will be back again. So never become like Gemini Rishi. Okay? So Krishna is saying, and Krishna himself is saying in this word, he's saying Dushpura Analena Cha. The Dushpura means insatiable. Analena means fire. So lust is insatiable. It's always going to be there, it's burning intensely. But I can control it by using it for Krishna's service. Right? You all must have heard of this cult, which was based on this fact that completely satisfy your senses, and then you will become to a position of liberation, which is a very stupid philosophy. I'm sorry if anybody of you believes or follows that, but just it's a completely senseless philosophy to have, right? It was a principle based on indulging ourselves. So Krishna is clearly telling us that it's a nitya vairina, it's a constant enemy, it's insatiable. So you have to use it for in the right way, and then you will be able to traverse this path of bhakti in this world. There's no other way of doing it. Right? And some very, let's see, Prabhupada say, yes. Prabhupada is saying lust cannot be satisfied by any amount of sense enjoyment, just as fire is never extinguished by a constant supply of fuel. Right? So there are these poems by Bhakti Vinod Thakur. They are called the Gopinath prayers. If you all have not read them, I suggest you read them. There are 3 poems which Bhakti Vinod Thakur wrote. One is Gopinath Mama Nivedan Suno, Gopinath Amar Upay Nahi, and then Gopinath Guchabo Sansara Jwala. Please extinguish this. If you hear those poems, you will be so humbled by them that a pure devotee like Bhakti Vinod Thakur is singing these poems at the peak of his bhakti. He's at the peak. He's a pure devotee right there, and he's writing poems where he's saying that Krishna, Amar Mana Ati Pagal, that my mind is mad and I have no control over it. Please help me. So for a pure devotee, as the person elevates in bhakti process, he or she becomes more and more humble. He becomes cautious, not frightened, cautious that this Maya is very powerful. Right? I've mentioned this before. Somebody asked, one of his disciples told Prabhupada, if Krishna wants us to surrender to him, why has he made this Maya so strong? Prabhupada said, the Maya is not strong, your intention is weak. Right? So make your intention so strong, and with that intensity, beg to Krishna for his mercy. That's all we can do. His Holiness Gaur Govind Swami Maharaj says, we are a crying school. All we can do is cry for Krishna. Krishna, have mercy on me. Krishna, please help me out. Gopinath prayers, if it interests you, if you have a desire to be humble, read those prayers, listen to them every day, and you'll see a significant change in your heart, that how a pure devotee can sing songs like what Bhakti Thakur is singing. And
Prabhu, it is available online, this Gopinath prayer?
Gopinath prayers, it should be on KK songs, but let me pull them up for you. KK songs. They'll be on, but there are three beautiful ones. You should just listen to them. Let me see. I pulled up one of them. Yeah, they're on KK songs. You can look them up. Search for Gopinath. They all should show up here.
Sure, Prabhu. Thank you.
Three of them. There are 3 poems. So look for all 3 of them. Okay, so coming to text 40. So now in 40, we're saying, so Krishna is saying, the senses, the mind, and the intelligence are the sitting places of this lust. Through them, lust covers the real knowledge of the living entity and bewilders him. So now here, what Krishna is doing, Krishna is giving the hierarchy. He's giving the sitting places of all these of the lust. So Prabhupada, let's read Prabhupada's purport. This is important. Lord Krishna is giving hints of those places, so that one who wants to conquer the enemy may know where he can be found. Once again, as I was saying earlier, if we know where our enemy is, who our enemy is, we'll be able to fight it much better. Mind is the center of all activities of senses, and thus when we hear about sense objects, the mind generally becomes a reservoir of all ideas, of sense gratification. And as a result, the mind and the senses become the repositories of lust. Next, the intelligence department becomes the capital of such lustful propensities. Intelligence is the immediate next door neighbor of the spirit soul. Lusty intelligence influences the spirit soul to acquire the false ego and identify itself with matter, and thus with the mind and senses. The spirit soul becomes addicted to enjoying the material senses and mistakes this as true happiness. So Prabhupada has summed it up for us perfectly. So the mind is driven by short-term emotions, instant pleasures. So mind is nothing but a repository, as Prabhupada is telling us here. It's a pattern. I like this, I don't like this. And that's all based on my inclinations, what I have done in the past. That's what the mind is. It's just dishing out what I have been putting it there in the repository over time, right? Whereas, so whatever my patterns in the past have been, accordingly, predictable patterns are run by the mind, right? So intelligence essentially is a faculty that makes conscious, rational decisions, right? So mind is a short-term emotions, instant pleasures, intelligence, long-term, and rational, conscious choices, right? So these are 2 different things. But when we get entrapped by the senses in turn fool the mind then fools the intelligence then convinces that the soul that this is the right thing, this is the thing we want to do, and then we become a fool. We get fooled in it. That's the way to understand. Okay. Okay. So yes, so Prabhupada is very clearly explaining this to us in the purport. So that's the way to understand the difference between the mind and the intelligence. So mind is just a repository. Mind doesn't have anything that it's not thinking, it's not feeling or willing, or it doesn't have any of those capacities. It's just a repository. Whatever I store there, it gives me that out back again. Whereas intelligence has this capacity to make conscious choices. But unfortunately, it being influenced by the mind, it gets affected. Right? That's the way to understand that. That's 40. Okay. So in 41, now Krishna is telling us, O Arjun, west of the Bharatas, in the very beginning, curb this great symbol of sin by regulating the senses and slay this destroyer of knowledge and self-realization. Right? So this is doing 41. Right? So Krishna is telling us that of the three, I told you three places that where this lust resides: senses, mind, and intelligence. And now which one is easy to control? The senses. Right? It's simple, right? You're walking on the street and you know that by looking at something, it might trap you in. You can just close your eyes. You can just cut off the senses from that particular thing, right? So that's one of the ways of essentially conquering lust, which Krishna is telling us. That so what Krishna wants to tell us, that the command is meant to go upwards, like, so it has to come from the soul, has to tell the intelligence what to do, intelligence has to tell the mind what to do, and accordingly the senses should work. The intelligence should control the mind and the senses, right? But then it's right now it's reverse. The senses are pulling it down, pulling the mind down. But then the mind should be turned upwards with the knowledge of our transcendental identity, right? By situating ourselves on a spiritual platform. So we can strengthen our intelligence. How we can strengthen it? So there are two ways. So one is coming from the top and from the bottom, both the sides. So we have to attack the enemy from both the ends. So from intelligence side, we can strengthen by scriptural reading, by philosophical conviction. Those things have to come from the top. We have to fortify our intelligence. Basically, that's what it means. And when we fortify our intelligence, the intelligence becomes the parent in the room. Don't let your buddhi go flabby. Otherwise, it will be like a parent in the room who's practically not there, right? So by hearing Shastra, by a philosophical conviction, we can strengthen our buddhi. We can strengthen our intelligence. And Krishna will say in the last verse, he will talk about deliberate spiritual intelligence, DSI, right? So buddhi has to be on a very strong program of deliberate spiritual intelligence. You have to deliberately do things. And that will, by that we will develop vivek, discrimination between right and wrong. What is right, what is wrong for us, right? Without that, our mana, that is the mind, and the indriya, the senses, they can go nuts and they run all over the place. So when we hear Shastras, when we do consciously, by deliberately, we do spiritually motivated things, then our samskaras, the things that have been written in our mind and the repository, they can be overwritten. Even a little bit of self-control, even a little bit of tapasya, even a little bit of austerity in our lives is very effective. It's very effective in bringing our mind to a higher platform, right? Every time we do, even a small victory is a victory. Always remember that. It's cumulative. Every time you make a small victory, be very happy, pat yourself on the back. Every time you do that, it gives you a tiny amount of illumination, right? It creates a new samskara. It creates something new in your repository, right? Most of the time I search this Vedabase. So when I go to Vedabase, I put V, immediately Google gives me the remaining part, right? But then I recently got my computer completely renewed, what do you call it, reformatted. And then I went on V, and it didn't give me Vedabase. It was giving me some random things. Why? Because the repository had been rewritten. So similarly, we can rewrite that repository. We can rewrite those samskaras. So we need deliberate spiritual intelligence. We need enlightened engagement in the world. We need services in the world, right? So a very practical way of doing it is look for areas that we have developed a habit of wasting time, and deliberately replace that time wasting habit with a productive, healthy one. So don't try to curb it, try to replace it with something positive. Curbing doesn't help us in any way. Okay. So that's what Krishna is telling us here, that regulate it right to the senses part. Senses part you can regulate by service, by doing devotional service. And then you attack it from the other end, from the intelligence side, through reading scriptures, through a philosophical conviction. And it's about training. You have to do it every day. Consistency over intensity. Consistency is king. You know, if you do the same thing again and again, you are strengthening the samskaras that you're putting up in there, right? So you get the right training, you get the right scriptural understanding, you have teachers, guides, mentors, and then you can move forward on that path, right? And Prabhupada talked about in a verse I think it was the 37th verse, Kamesha, Krodesha, Rajoguna, Samudbhava, that one can rise from ignorance and passion to the mode of goodness by a method of regulated living and acting. And Prabhupada also said this in the introduction of Nectar of Instruction, which we read, that one can come to the mode of goodness. When one comes to the mode of goodness, then further advancement is revealed to us. How to make further advancement is revealed to us. So, by deliberate spiritual intelligence, by putting in the philosophical conviction, reading scriptures, we are controlling our mind and senses and trying to redirect them. And when we try that, just because we are sincere enough, Krishna comes and intervenes them. So don't think that, oh, I'm not in a mode of goodness, I'm useless. Don't get into that victimology. You are perfect. All you just need to do is redirect those things, and then Krishna will come and help you out. Right? So that's what Krishna is telling us in here. Let's see if there's something Prabhupada tells us. Okay, this is something we talked about earlier. So lust is only the perfect, perverted reflection of love of God, which is natural for living entity. So it's just a perverted reflection. Now comes the 42nd verse, where Krishna is giving the hierarchy. Where's my slides? I thought I had some slides also. Right? So yeah, so this is the 3 verses. Now that we are coming into 40 to 43, is Krishna is telling us how to conquer this enemy. That is by knowing the place, clearly giving up. Okay, here's where the enemy is sitting, and here this is what you have to do with them: regulate them. And how do I regulate them? First of all, you have to understand the hierarchy of those sitting places, right? This is the hierarchy that Krishna has given us. Sense objects, they affect the senses. The senses tell the mind, this is what I want. The mind tells the intelligence. The intelligence has become weak for me. It's become flabby. I'm like a couch potato. But by philosophical conviction and scriptural reading, my mind intelligence becomes strong, the parent in the room. And then it can tell the mind, no, this is not what I want. And the mind will tell the senses, no, this is not something we're going to do. Right? We don't get any points for that. So that's the hierarchy now Krishna is giving in this verse of Bhagavad Gita 42. The working senses are superior to dull matter. Mind is higher than the senses. Intelligence is still higher than the mind, and he, the soul, is even higher than the intelligence. So we are highest most, but unfortunately we have been entrapped by these whims and fantasies of the sense objects. So Krishna is now telling us what is the right way of it, right? First he tells us who the enemy is, then he tells me where he lives, third he tells me how can I control it, and fourth he's telling me this is how it will look like when you control it. This is the right way of looking at it. Okay, if I know what the problem is, but I don't know what the outcome is going to be out of when I solve the problem, I might have a big confusion how to solve that problem. I need to know what the outcome is going to be. Krishna is doing that exactly. He's the perfect leader. Last but not the least, the most important verse of this chapter, but not the most important purport of this chapter. And we'll read this. Thus, knowing oneself to be transcendental to the material senses, mind and intelligence, O mighty armed Arjuna, one should steady the mind by deliberate spiritual intelligence, Krishna consciousness, and thus, by spiritual strength, conquer this insatiable enemy called as lust. So this is a very good acronym that I have in my book. It's DSI. So I might have mentioned to this, right? So we have nagging material desires. So those are NMDs. You fight those nagging material desires by TLNs, tender loving neglect, and by deliberate spiritual intelligence, DSI. So don't try to unnecessarily engage in things that are not supposed to be done, and makes some very voluntary life changes, VLCs. So make some very voluntary life changes that can put you on the right path. That is why this deliberate spiritual intelligence is very, very important. The word itself is very important, deliberate. You have to put an effort for it. It's not just going to happen by itself. You have to deliberate upon it. And when that inner landscape becomes less hazy, becomes more clear for us, then we will be able to discriminate. We'll get that Vivek I was talking about, discrimination. Okay, this is what I will listen to, this is what not I will not listen to it, right? And this differentiation power comes when we invest ourselves in this process of bhakti, in the process of devotional service, as Prabhupada has very, very clearly delineated for us, right? So chanting, right? Chanting, we do chanting, our mind distracts, we try to pull it back, we are alert, determined, and we try to check the mind before. So all those things. So there's some very practical ways of controlling these. So to restrict it, and strengthen our consciousness, strengthen our intelligence, and be more confident that we will be able to tackle the mind. So basically that's what is being mentioned here. Okay, that was let's see. And Prabhupada in the purport, why I was saying this is important purport is that Prabhupada says he's giving the sum total of the chapter here. So let's read this and you will understand what the whole chapter was discussed. That's the brilliance of Prabhupada. His oceanic intelligence, that he can pack so much in a small paragraph. Desire for overlording and for sense gratification is the greatest enemy of the conditioned soul. We talked about Dehatma Buddhi, the problem, in chapter 1. In chapter 2, Krishna gives us, tells us, you're not the body, you're a soul, Arjun. So, but then, because I am a Dehatma Buddhi, my mind is still on a bodily platform, I'm foolish, I want to lord over this material nature, and that is the biggest enemy I have. That's the lust, that sense gratificatory nature, that overlording nature, that's the lust. But by the strength of Krishna consciousness, one can control the material senses, the mind, and intelligence. So that's what Krishna is asking us to do, deliberate spiritual intelligence, right? Don't give up that work. Don't give up that prescribed duty suddenly. It's going to happen organically in your life. Gradually develop it by redirecting your activities with a spiritual perspective, right? You can then, Prabhupada is saying, but by gradually developing Krishna consciousness, one can be situated in a transcendental position without being influenced by the material senses and the mind, by steady intelligence directed towards one pure identity. That's the whole chapter in these few sentences. Don't give up your duty whimsically because you have a prakriti. Control your vasana. That's not your nature. That's not in harmony with your swadharma. So that's another thing. And how do you do that? By deliberate spiritual intelligence. By constantly meditating upon it, right? All of us have to take inventory of what gives us faith. Okay, practice those things more regularly, right? And what gives you faith will vary from person to person. So purpose of bhakti is to make our mind a memory, a treasure house of all these memories of bhakti, right? All those philosophically convincing spiritual experiences you have, right? They should be a readily accessible written resource for all of you, for all of us actually, by you, for all of us, me also. And I should be able to readily expand upon it. So, right, rather than falling trapped to doubts, I reflect on what gives me faith. That will strengthen your intelligence. That is deliberate spiritual intelligence, right? And so obviously there will be things that will challenge our faith and there will be some things that will give us faith. So take account, be conscious of what is giving you faith, right? Be conscious of your weakness, but focus on your strength. That's what it is, right? If you just keep saying, oh, I'm weak, I can't control my senses, that was going to demotivate. But if you have an inventory of things written down, and then you can always go back and read them, okay? We must always continue to remember and cultivate our strengths and ensure they grow, not focus on our weaknesses, right? So that's the important part. That's something that we all have to understand, right? That's how we reach them. I just gave you a very practical way, which has really helped me a lot. I have my notebook right here. I always access it. I have written down things that I like, verses, something I heard in lectures. I write them down. I highlight them. I know which verses where Prabhupada talks about motivating things, where he has motivational. I have those written down. Whenever day I'm down, I go and read them, and I'm back to my normal self, my normal spiritually inclined self. So take an inventory of whatever gives you faith and practice those things very, very regularly. Situate your mind on a spiritual platform. Then we can go beyond the pulse of the lust or beyond the push of the lust. Then we experience higher happiness. Right? So that's what we have to use our intelligence to contemplate. And Krishna is giving us a recommendation: regulate the senses and situate ourselves on the spiritual platform by deliberate spiritual intelligence. Okay. I'll finish here. I'm sorry I went over by a few minutes, but we completed the chapter on a bang here. So, but Krishna giving us a very logical way of controlling this lust. Deliberate spiritual intelligence. Override the samskaras you have by self-control, by tapasya, and every time you do it, you have kind of eroded some of that enjoying mentality in our mind. Okay. Any last minute things or your thoughts in your mind?
Prabhuji, you mentioned TLLM again, tender.
I'll read out your organization. So fight NMDs. NMDs means nagging material desires. So fight NMDs with TLN. TLN is tender, loving neglect. So don't let these senses control you. Sometimes just ignore it, just like a child. Keep on tugging onto you. Papa, I want this, I want this. I say no, ignore it. And DSI, deliberate spiritual intelligence. And how do you do that? You just do your obligatory duty. Don't try to get too much involved in your duties and your in your material things. That's disinterested obligatory duties, DOTs, and you make VLCs, voluntary life changes. That's the sentence I have written. So you do that. So make voluntary life changes slowly and steadily. You will come to that position where your mind will be strong, intelligence will be fortified, and we will be able to go in whichever direction we want to go. Anything else? Okay. No, okay, that's good. Thank you. We will wrap up now. I have checked the first answers to the first chapter. I haven't yet gotten the second one. Been a bit busy with the Gita Marathon. And thank you for everybody who is involved. All of you are involved practically. I know all of you are doing Gita Marathon, reaching out or yourself contributing. So thank you. And if anybody else wants to do something else, please let me know. I'm always available. But yes, I've been just busy with that. Gita Marathon. I've not been able to come to the second chapter. If you have not answered any of the questions, still, this is my last request. Please go ahead and do it. It will be very hard for me to, if you kind of miss these questions, then in the end, because you're all trying to move towards a Bhakti Sastri degree, and that there are some requirements for it. Unfortunately, if you don't fulfill them, it will be hard for me to give that, to come to a position where, and that will be heartbreaking for me because you all are putting in extensive effort. So please, if you have not answered questions, please go ahead and answer them. Thank you very much. Once again, sorry. Yes.
We have the recording for the last session, Prabhuji.
It's on the YouTube page, Matri. You have the link to your YouTube channel. I'll put it again if you don't have it, but I uploaded on the YouTube and now it's public.